Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for December 14th, 2023. I'm going to review some of the headlines from the last days, which will give you a very clear sense that the LaRouche movement has been right in its assessment of the strategic situation as well as its solutions to the crises which otherwise are moving humanity into a desperate condition of war and depression. You can see that the reason we've been right is that there's such a thing as natural law, which comes from the intersection of science, history, and culture, that man either adopts principles which reflect the ordering principles of the physical universe, or will suffer from the mistakes that are made. And there's no amount of money and military power that can make up for these bad mistakes. And lying and spinning and censorship won't hide reality, because reality will emerge with a vengeance. And those pushing the narratives based on the lies and censorship will be exposed as corrupt frauds who have no business determining policies that affect the 8 billion plus people on the planet. So let's start with the events from the last couple of days in Washington. The last visit of Volodymyr Zelensky to Washington to beg for money for a war that he was forced to accept and stick with by his NATO controllers. What we said from the beginning is that the war cannot be won, no matter how much weaponry is sent in. The results have been predetermined, that Ukraine will suffer, Russia will have some damages to it in terms of loss of lives, but that ultimately the NATO prospect of weakening Russia by military assault of the Ukrainian army will fail. There should have been negotiated settlement based on the idea of mutual security going back to 2014. In fact, there shouldn't have been a coup in 2014. That was funded by Soros and Victoria Nuland and the Obama administration, with a commitment to weaken Russia and move NATO eastward, which has continued since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. So this is just reality coming back with a vengeance. And Zelensky's appeal was met by legitimate concern from Republicans that the spending of more money in this war is not only a waste of money, but a destruction of human lives. So how many more will die in this war? How many more will suffer in the rest of the world due to the bankruptcy which is being inflicted on them by the war policy? The only solution is an exit strategy based on recognition of mutual security needs of Ukraine and Russia, which means no more NATO expansion and means an acceptance that part of Ukraine, which was under attack after the Maidan coup, will end up as Russian territory. Now, secondly, look at what's happening in the Middle East. What we've been saying is that Israel the Netanyahu government of Israel is committed to depopulation of Palestinians, an ethnic cleansing policy. The method they're now adopting is that of the Roman Empire, pumping salt water into the land to destroy the land and the population. Instead of desalination, that is, instead of taking the salt out of the water so it can be used for agriculture, drinking, and other purposes, which is what the Oasis plan is, what they're doing is using the method of the Roman Empire, which was deployed to destroy Carthage. It's not coincidental that the world is turning against Israel and against the United States because of the adoption of this policy. Third, the implosion of the European Union. There will be a vote today, which is an attempt to include the possibility of Ukraine as an EU member other kinds of so-called reforms, but the EU as a whole is a political fraud. It's based on destroying the sovereignty of nations, not for the benefit of the people of those nations, but for the benefit of the corporate cartels that run the European Union. And while Brexit has been a failure because of the idiocy of the Tory party in the United Kingdom, and as well the corruption of the alternative parties, the same thing is true of the rest of the continent, that there's no political coordination that will work when the policies that are being pursued go against the interests of the people of those countries. That's why sovereign nations exist. So you have governments that represent the actual interests of the people who live in those countries, as opposed to the private interests of the greedy corporate cartels acting over and above the nation state. Germany is heading into a depression. Industry is leaving. There are similar problems throughout the continent. So the idea of using war spending, another $50 billion for Ukraine, you think that's going to solve the problems of the European Union? If you think that, you're not getting the message. Now, the final point I want to highlight is the emergence of an anti-colonial movement worldwide, whether you call it the Global South, the revival of the non-aligned movement, or just plain anti-colonialism. This is what's happening. The rejection of the unipolar order dictates, the rejection of International Monetary Fund looting carried out on behalf of private banks and corporate cartels, and a rejection of the green depopulation model. Whatever spin you're hearing coming from the COP28 conference, it doesn't reflect the fact that the reality is that most of the world is rejecting the idea that there should be poverty in order to sustain the existing world order, using the fake science of climate change to impose that. And what we're seeing instead is the rise of China and the BRICS. The rise of China is based on sound economic policies, an effort to build physical economy as opposed to a speculative system. And that's why we're seeing a de-dollarization move coming from much of the world. So you put this all together, and what's clear is that the idea of a unipolar order is dying. And here's one testimony from a former diplomat from Singapore writing in the Financial Times, an article titled, "It's Time for the West and the Rest to Talk to Each Other as Equals." And he writes, "Something profound is happening in the world, a kind of metaphysical detachment of the West from the rest. Where the West was once seen as having the answers, the rest of the world now realizes that they will have to find their own way," unquote. Now this was printed in the Financial Times. Ironic, huh? The British Empire acknowledging that the policies of the British Empire no longer hold. Now, this conforms with what Helga LaRouche has been emphasizing. The problem with the Western establishment, besides the corruption and greed, is that it's too arrogant, too egocentric to acknowledge that its policies are wrong, that it's failing, and it's being rejected. They keep making the same mistake. The idea that because of the historic military and financial power of the West in the post-World War II period, that they can dictate the rules. And those who don't accept those rules are subject to regime change coups, assassinations, and military invasion. Now, we've been right on all of these key issues for many, many years. And these are the issues which will determine whether there's going to be continuous devolution or the adoption of a new strategic and development architecture with the God-given principle that was enshrined in the principle of the Peace of Westphalia. That principle is the idea of sovereign nations acting for mutual benefit. The golden rule of Christianity, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's not outdated. That's what we mean by natural law. That if you don't have that as a principle, you will be committed permanently to a law of the jungle, survival of the fittest. the strongest beast will determine the policy. And that is what we are seeing today being rejected by most of the world. Now, tomorrow's Friday. I'll take your questions and comments. You can send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. And I'm happy to announce that starting today, the daily update will be posted every day on Rumble. So you can look for us on Rumble if you can't find us on Facebook or YouTube.